Hello, my name is Paul Maratius, and I am a candidate for the Masters of Science in Education in Curriculum and Instruction, with an emphasis in teaching English to speakers of other languages. And my professional experience is as an English as a conversation teacher in Tokyo, Japan. I've been in Japan a little bit over 7 years, and for that time I've had a few different teaching positions. I started teaching in a vocational college, a 2-year school, and then I went to elementary school, and now I've been in a very large private high school in the suburbs of Tokyo for the past 3 years. It's called Urawa Jitsugyo Gakuen, and it has close to 4,000 students total. And I teach the entire 11th grade English conversation class, which is about 650 students I have, and the classroom is also very large. I have 41 students in each class. So, yes, I'm very excited to continue this presentation, and I will now get into the next slide, which is learning outcomes. Okay, learning outcome 1C standards. This uses and applies standards relevant to the candidate's context to design, implement, and or assess learning experiences. And the reason I selected this artifact was because it was the first time that I was able to take all of the theories that we were studying as a class and apply them to a real lesson, to create a lesson plan, first a lesson plan and then a unit with 3 lessons that would embed all of the grammatical forms and functions we were learning how to apply to our lessons, and it would allow me to use graphic organizers. It would allow me to use students' funds of knowledge and background knowledge and integrate all of these into a larger lesson plan and a unit. And this is called the Sheltered Instruction Observation Protocol, or the SIOP model. And using this model really gave me the chance to watch my students really start to become more autonomous and start to work in groups. We focused a lot on project-based language learning, and we focused on task-based language teaching. And as I said earlier, this was the first chance for me to really take all of these concepts and ideas that we were studying and put them in a lesson, create a unit, and then use it in real life. I used it in my own lessons in Japan, which I talked about in my artifact. So I would like to continue to talk further about this in the next slide. Alright, so in CNT 820, Teaching English as a Second Language, Bilingual Education, this was again the first course that we started in this program, with the TESOL program, that worked specifically with the English language learner, the ELO. The previous course in this program was CNT 709. This is Curriculum and Instruction, Introduction to the Theorists and all the models and of curriculum. And I studied James Popham, who talked about creating objectives, clear, measurable objectives. And I carried that over into the next course. And that mentality of thinking only about, what are our objectives? How do we assess them? That really helped me when I had to design a lesson plan and a unit, which was, as I said, the SIOP model. And doing this was interesting because the SIOP model is really is designed more for mainstream English or mainstream classrooms in the U.S., right? It could be anything. It could be an English class, a science class, social studies, mathematics. And it's designed to help the English language learner integrate into the mainstream classroom, to learn grammatical forms and functions and target vocabulary through thematic units, and to really develop a way to become part of the classroom community. However, I am teaching in Japan, and I'm teaching within a context that is a little bit different because I have the ability to make my own lessons and my own curriculum. And we have a textbook that is content-based, right? So it was a content-based textbook, CBI, content-based instruction, but it's not really designed for content language teaching. It's a very superficial version of what you would call content-based text. So I used the PSYOP model to create a lesson based on a unit that I was actually teaching. Even though it was supposed to be a hypothetical assignment, I got permission from the professor to actually use the content from my textbook, which was a chapter on Cuba. And we learned later on in that there was, there's something called Heroes and Holidays, or there's a very superficial approach to teaching content. And the textbook I had did that. So I wanted to use the PSYOP model as a way to kind of teach the social studies aspect, or the social justice aspects of the Cuban culture unit, while at the same time teaching English as a foreign language, or English conversation. So what I did was I first looked at our readings. We read Diaz-Rico in Learning Strategies and Learner-Focused Teaching. That was a really excellent textbook. And in later courses, I would read authors that Diaz referred to, which I thought was even more interesting. For example, Oxford wrote a book on meta-strategies. Diaz refers to Brown, Douglas Brown, who I used 2 of his textbooks later on in the program. So it's interesting to see how everything is connected. I also read Chivara and Graves, and Short and Chivara, I hope I'm saying the name correctly. And they are the pioneers of the PSYOP model. The 2 articles I read by them were actually very deep. And I took all of this reading and all of the background knowledge I had found on my own, and I applied it to creating my own 3-part lesson. And in this lesson, I needed to use standards, which were the Kansas Common Core state standards. And then I used the Oregon State Language Arts Standards. And I used the Oregon State Language Arts Standards to identify target grammar, or grammatical forms. For example, what forms am I going to use? And then functions. What functions are those forms supposed to enable the English language learner to perform? For example, asking questions, asking directions, right? And then I embedded them into the content, which was the unit on Cuba, which you'll see in my artifact. And in doing this, I was also able to connect to the theorists I learned about in CNT 709, Paulo Freire and Michael Apple in particular. I wanted to do more work with critical pedagogy. So I decided to use the PSYOP model to teach content, embed the grammatical forms and functions, while at the same time getting across the message that we need to think about the world we live in, the words we use to describe the world we live in, and how we have a global perspective, or we have a responsibility as English language learners or any learner to think about how we impact society and how we can help each other to make the world a better place. So what I did was I found a video on Cuba that is based on Cuban children playing baseball in the street with a rock wrapped in a rag. And I knew that my Japanese English language learners loved baseball. So I decided to sort of make a connection between look at these children, how they live, and look at how you live. Could you imagine playing baseball with a rock wrapped in a rag? I wanted to get them to sort of think about things that are, go beyond language, beyond grammatical forms and functions and memorization of vocabulary. I wanted to start thinking about social issues. And I applied that to my context by using this as the way I would teach from now on. Actually, for the past 1.5 years, since I started this lesson, I've been doing content-based instruction, which is really focused on critical pedagogy and critical thinking, and finding ways to take the content and make it relatable to the world outside, the world that impacts my English language learners, by using problem posing questions and a lot of group work also, which is also this activity helped me to really realize the importance of project-based learning, especially task-based language teaching. I figure out that these models of group work, these activities, they get students to develop a sense of autonomy, because they start to own the learning. They start to realize, maybe I need to find out the answers for myself. I need to cooperate with my classmates. We need to come to a conclusion about, what is it we're trying to discover together. And I think that also really helps with language learning, which we learned about it later on in CNT 822. We talked also about how autonomy is student autonomy really plays a key role in second language acquisition. So one other thing I really benefited from as well was instructor feedback, both from Dr. I hope you say his name, Habitarium, and Dr. Roca. They both gave me good advice to sort of, I guess, reshape the lens I viewed the SIOP model through, whether it be making corrections to the order of my activities, or just rephrasing some of the wording I used in my artifacts. So continuing, like I said, moving forward, I'm going to continue to use this model from now on. And I've actually bought this book that you see, Making Content Comprehensible for English Learners. I bought it through Amazon, and they delivered it to Japan. And going forward, I'm going to study this SIOP model more and apply it to my EFL language classroom. Like I said earlier, I know it's designed for the mainstream classroom, but I'm going to use it in my own teaching context. So I would like to talk about now the deeper understanding that I realized during the CNT 898 part of the course. This was a wonderful way to make connections. I talked about in the last slide how I found in the Diaz book, I found books that I later read in other courses. And going back, I started to make even more connections to everything I had done. I reread discussions that I had with classmates. I watched some video lectures. I just went through everything all over again. And it was great because I felt like I was reteaching some things to myself. Some things I had written in the past I cringed at, like, oh no, that's not right. I know more now. And some things I thought, wow, I had a pretty good idea about maybe a year ago of what I was doing. So it's really given me a chance to reflect, to self-reflect, and to assess how far I've come and how far I need to continue to go. The reading will not stop. I'm going to continue to study. I'm going to continue to read. As I said, I've got a lot of books. I got this book, Nell Notings on Caring. I really want to read more on that. I've referred to Michael Apple's book, Knowledge, Power, and Education, throughout this program, and I'm going to continue to read that book. This book, Pedagogy of the Oppressed, if you've looked at my artifacts, you can tell Ferrer has played a huge role in influencing my work. I've read this book about 3 or 4 times, and I'm going to continue to read it and reread it, because every time I read it, I discover something new, which is very much like this program, CNT 898. By going back and rereading things I wrote and things I said, I discovered more about myself and about how far I've come. And another interesting book, which I have a quote that I attributed to the end of my project, is from this book. This is one of the best books I've found. It's called We Make the Road by Walking. And it's Paulo Freire and Miles Horton. This is a very excellent text on just thinking about, our role as educators and how we should, view the student as an equal, as somebody that we can learn from. They can learn from us, we can learn from them, and it's really all about communication and cooperation. So my further readings, I've already got a lot to read. I've become kind of a book collector throughout this program because I found so many wonderful books along the way that I've bought or I'm going to buy. So I have a lot of reading to do, I think, over the next year, 6 months to a year. And this has just been a wonderful experience. It's hard to articulate everything in a video, especially like this, but I've really made a lot of deep connections to what we've studied and what I'm doing with my life as a teacher. Okay, so thank you again for taking the time to watch my video presentation and for reading through my artifacts. This has been a wonderful experience, one that will influence me for the rest of my life, and I will plan on continuing to grow and move forward.